Hey guys, what's up? So, got ourselves another cutting video today. And I got as you can see, I got the trusty stand and my swords. But we're going to be using these to actually show some tips on basic cutting, like how to get a proper cut. We're going to be using it with my Hanjian here and my custom Katana light Katana right here. I'm going to be using both swords to show basic cutting technique, both for people who are doing backyard cutting or for people who are actually properly training with a sword. Because I got a question under my last cutting video on tips, like asking for tips or advice on what it takes to make a proper cut. So I thought I would go into that in this video. But first, as you can see, what I'm doing here is inspecting my sword. Whether you're a beginner, an expert, whatever, you always want to inspect your sword. You want to make sure that there's nothing wrong with the blade, that it's still straight, that the edge looks proper. You know, I'm checking for rust spots, any weaknesses, cracks. You don't want anything to mess you up. I'm also checking the stability of the hilt, making sure there's no rattling. That's why I'm doing those swings there, making sure nothing is shaking, rattling in the handle. Oh God, it hurts looking at my form right now. That rear leg is not supposed to be raising up when I cut. I know better than this. What the hell? Anyway. But yeah, I'm checking the blade, making sure it's fine. So here, what I'm showing is generally what you want to do when you're cutting. You know, you're using the left hand, as you can see there, to pull, and the right hand to guide the blade. So the left hand's cutting is actually adding the power. The right hand's adding the stability and guiding where the blade goes. And you're pulling with the left while you're guiding with the right. See how it just pulls? And that is what causes that nice slicing motion that you get with curved swords like this. And also the torquing of the waist. It's allowing you to use the curve. And there I'm showing, like, if you're a beginner and you're trying to learn to not throw yourself open when you're over swinging, you can find ways of bringing the sword back to a defensive position, as you saw right there. That's something that you might want to do, even if you're a backyard cutter. So here, we got a little soda bottle here, and we're going to slice through it using the mechanics I showed you. Pulling with the left, guiding with the right, and using a bit of waist torsion. You're going to torque with the waist. And if you do it right, as you can see, I didn't overswing. Blade is still forward, and I made a decent cut. You see? I mean, I'm not perfect with this weapon. Again, I'm not a katana guy, but as you can see, I still was able to slice through with a nice, clean cut. There was one side that looked a little uneven, but for the most part, it was clean. It was a good cut, good slice. So generally, that's if you're using a curved sword like a katana, and you're using it two-handed, that's how you basically. Those are the very basics you want, and of course, edge alignment, which we're going to be getting into later, especially when I talk about the unique problems of cutting with one hand, which is what I have to face. But yeah, that's generally what you want. Pull with the left, guide with the right hand, if you're right-handed, of course. And, use a bit of waist to power through the blade and try not to overswing. You get that right and you get your edge alignment right, you will do proper cuts. Now, as you can see, what I'm doing is wiping all that water off, because after every cut, you want to wipe that water off. And when you're done for the day, you get all the water off and oil that thing immediately, because you don't want rust spots on your blade, do you? Even if it's a cheap sword, you don't want too much rust on your blade. Even if it's just a little light rust, it'll add up sooner or later, and then you're going to end up with a blade that you can't cut with anymore because it's going to break on you, and that's rather unsafe. So here I am, just making sure there's no water before I put it back in the sheath. And when I get home, it's going to be all nice and oiled. So yeah, make sure you examine your weapon. When you're cutting, remember the basics. Pull with the left, guide with the right, use the waist, cut, wipe. And then when you're done, oil. So now here's my Hanjian. And cutting with a straight sword is almost the same as cutting with a curved sword, except there's a little bit of a difference in technique, particularly with longsword guys. And then me in particular, I got an extra problem of doing it with one hand, but we'll get into that later. First, as you can see, once again, I'm examining my blade. You want to make sure that there's nothing wrong, and getting rid of residue and stuff. And while I'm wiping the blade down here, I will just give, I guess, some basic pointers for somebody who's just starting to cut with a longsword. Whether you are, beginner, or whether you're just straight up a backyard cutter, or whether you're, actually training for practicality reasons. you got to realize that there's a little bit of a difference if you're going to be cutting with one of these. You don't cut with them exactly the same way as you would with a katana. It's similar, but you're going to be stepping with the cut. Like, you see that? It's a little bit more of a percussive cut because you're not. It's a straight sword. It doesn't facilitate with the curve of the blade. You know, there's still going to be some slice, but what's going to help you power through is to step in with the cut. It's a bit of a difference in technique. So we'll use this little Gatorade bottle here, a Powerade bottle, to demonstrate. Look at your target. Keep sword in front, and step in and cut. As you can see, it pretty much goes in. You still are using your left hand to power it, right hand to guide it, but the step is what's going to help to facilitate the power there. And I sliced through the top pretty well. There was a little bit of a crack on the bottle from the cut, which means I don't think I did it cleanly enough, but it still cut through. So, and of course, wiping down. Now, I got a different problem because I'm cutting with one hand. So that means both powering through and guiding the blade is all done with one hand, which makes it a little bit harder. And not only that, but I also got to make sure my edge alignment is perfect. As you can see there, just got to get that perfect edge alignment and then snap the blade back true so I'm not over swinging, you know, for practicality reasons. Here I am going through some drills where these are the cuts that I like doing, where no matter where I'm cutting, I want to make sure I'm still in a decent defensive position, or I can at least get back to a defensive position afterwards, which again is a little bit harder when you're using one hand because, you know, it's especially if you got a properly weighed weapon, the weight might be too much. And the extra problem I have is my particular weapon has a round grip, see? Whereas most swords, especially swords that were made in more modern times or more of a modern development, well, I shouldn't say modern, like later than when my sword was designed, has a flat grip. Like even this katana here, and the katana in the past, they had a flat sides. They had flat sides. So it was easier when you're gripping the weapon to know where the edge is. See? But me, well, I got a round one. So it's a little bit harder, but to be perfectly honest, I've never really had a problem with edge alignment with this weapon because of certain things that I'm about to show you. No matter what sword you are gripping, always remember this. When you're gripping the weapon, as you can see here, see, the edge is always, like if you hold your weapon flat, you see where your fingers are pointing? That's where the edge is going to be. So when you close your hands, look at where your fingers would be pointing, or but your index finger is pointing, is where the edge is going to be. So keep that in mind. And when you close your hands, see where the foreknuckle on my index finger is? See that? That's where the edge drops. And if you point your finger straight out, that's where the edge drops. As long as you're mindful of that, and as long as you're swinging in the direction of where your fingers would go if you were chopping with your open hand, that's where the edge is going to be. So that should help you. Keep that in mind when you're cutting. Also, you see what I just did right there? I did that to demonstrate something. Look how deeply cut that bottle was, even though I did that very light flick of the blade. I did that to prove a point. You do not need brute strength, or you do not need to overcut in order to make a proper deep cut. All you need is proper technique. I'm going to show that here as well, where I'm going to demonstrate a proper one-handed circular cut using, like in the Chinese fashion, I guess, even though other styles have used it this way too. I'm going to rely on proper edge alignment. I am not going to overswing, and the sword is going to remain forward after I'm done. I'm going to step in too. Watch. Look at the sword. Do a small little circle. Look at that. Look at that. I didn't really make a huge motion, did I? But look at that. This was probably the cleanest cut I did of that day. See? And all I needed to do that was proper edge alignment. Look how clean that cut is. I just needed proper edge alignment and proper technique in order to make that work. Now here's what a bad technique is going to look like. I'm just going to try to power through it. Don't care about edge alignment. I'm just going to... Look at that. Not only did the bottle not get cut, but the shock was so much that it went through the blade and knocked the pommel off. Some of you guys may know why that happened. I don't have a crappy sword. It's just that I had disassembled my sword and I haven't properly put the pommel back on. You know, I need to fix that. Still haven't fixed it yet. Anyway, now, same bottle. Proper technique this time. It's sliced through. The difference there, edge alignment, and I used a little bit of waist power there too, because that helps to power the blade. I'm not trying to use brute strength. I'm trying to use technique. Knowing where my edge is, swinging in the direction of my edge and bringing it down, and looking properly at my target. That's another tip I can give you guys, especially those of you who are trying to learn to cut practically, not just simply, you know, backyard cutting. you want to look where you're cutting, which is still something I'm working on. But you want if you want to make those nice precise cuts, you got to train for that. Like, like look at your target carefully, and there goes the cap. And there goes the rest of the bottle. And you may notice that what I'm doing is, if I find myself over swinging, then I swing it back around so the point's there. That's another clean cut, as you can see. All edge alignment. And notice, again, I'm doing this with one hand to show that you don't need to power through the cut. With two hands, yeah, you got all that strength. You feel confident. But with one, it's not easy. And of course, me being a numbskull, it's the one-handed cutting is harder, and yet that's what I started with. Because I'm trained to fight one-handed, so, well, that was my lot, Anyway, this final cut I'm going to be showing you is why I think beginners should start using milk jugs. Because milk jugs are very easy to cut. Soda bottles, Arizona bottles, those are harder. Milk jugs are a bit easier to learn proper edge alignment. And not only that, but you can do trick cuts as well, like cutting 2-3 times. Like this one, I'm trying to do a cross cut. 1, 2. And they got cut. See? 1, 2. Thing is cut. Don't try to do that when you're first starting out, though. Double cuts, they're a little bit harder to do. Get the proper mechanics of doing single cuts first. And once you feel confident doing that, then you can move on to trying to doing double and triple stuff. You got to be careful doing those, because sometimes when you're trying to hit the target, you might mess up and end up hitting an object you didn't want to hit, which is just going to damage your sword. You don't want that, do you? So rely on first, single cuts first, first downward cuts, because those are the easiest, and rising cuts and things like that. And remember, edge alignment, proper technique, that should do it. Anyway, I hope that proves helpful for you guys. Catch you guys later.